Man, Auburn fans need Byrum Brown to be that guy.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Lindsay Crosby of the barn, auburn.com, as well as other places, hanging out with us today. Auburn baseball starts this week. We'll pick Lindsay's brain on that. We got a tight end question about the offense. We got a running back question about the offense. But, man, I just thought this was somewhat timely of a discussion to have about Byrum Brown because, like, with questions circulating around, like, okay, what's the upside for this Auburn basketball season? That's been something that's kind of held this fan base above water during this rough several years, last 5 years of the Auburn football program, really, really struggling. And I think Auburn basketball is still a tournament team and all of that, but I do think the ceiling is lower than it has been in recent memory. And I think they need a win on the football field, Lindsay. And I think Byrum Brown is the closest thing that we've had to an all-star stud quarterback face of the program that we've had in a long time. And there's going to be a lot of hope placed on him. There's going to be a lot of pressure placed on him. And I think even the way Alex Golesh is kind of handling press this offseason, which I'm all for, he's not backing down off of any of it. And I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's been forever since you could look at the Auburn offense and even say it really felt like they knew what they were doing, never mind being a really good unit. And I think Justin Ferguson did a great job of kind of breaking down when you look at not just what they did from the raw numbers, but when you dig into how efficient they were, how explosive they were, even when you adjust for competition, they were like a top 5 offense in the country. And you've brought a big portion of that offense to Auburn, and the majority of that runs through Brown. And so, like, if it can translate 90% to the SEC, we know the offense works. We've seen it work at Tennessee. If Byrum Brown and these personnel can translate this to the SEC, this is the first time Auburn's going to have an above-average offense, it feels like, going back to the days of Gus Malzahn, who just retired, and God bless him.
Sure.
It's just, but we really need a win. I did a baseball preview thing last week with somebody, and they asked me, is baseball the best program on campus? Because football's been so bad recently.
Yes.
Baseball's not, and basketball is not good right now because it's a transition year. And so they said, is baseball the best program on campus? Is Butch Thompson the best coach on campus? And I think he is. But, like, Auburn football should always be in that conversation, and they're just not right now. And we need this.
Correct. And, I don't necessarily agree with all the chatter about, the Cam Newton comparisons or whatever, but I do think what they're saying when people do compare Byrum Brown to Cam Newton, if they truly think, oh, Byrum Brown's going to be like a generational athlete or whatever, like, great. I hope they're right. But what I think they're really saying in a non-exaggerated way is we think Byrum Brown is a massive and athletic quarterback, and he plays at Auburn, and he's going to be good and successful. Like, I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Instead of comparing it to Cam Newton, it just sounds flashier to do all that.
And I think those running quarterback at Auburn, that does a power type of running is going to be compared to Cam Newton. That's just the way it is. Joey.
Yeah, there are people in the comment section in the second half of the Arkansas game of my post-game show saying, I don't want to overreact, but seeing Ashton Daniels out there really reminded me of Cam Newton. I'm like, stop. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. But if you want to say what you liked what you saw and what you saw think you can lead to success, I'm all for that. And if you want to say the same thing about Byrum Brown, is like I like the traits that he possesses, and I think they can be used in a way on this coaching staff to turn questionable close games into wins. Yeah, I think that's awesome. I don't think that's calling him Cam Newton, but I do think that that's something that Byrum Brown can do. He can run with his legs. He can pass just fine with his arm. I do think he's a better runner, but regardless, he has shown that he has those intangibles. And so now, like you said, adjusting for competition, what can this look like? Something that Alex Golesh has said over and over and over again, because he's been asked, and it's a relevant question, and he'll talk. Goodness, he'll talk. I didn't really see that coming. But he always seems so relieved when he discusses the familiarity with his guys, whether it's, his quarterback, whether it's his center coming with him, whether it's his running back coming with him, whether it's these receivers coming with him, the offensive coordinator. There's so much familiarity where, like, the irony is there might be more to adjust to if you were retained and were on Auburn's roster last year and you chose to come back. So a unique situation, but these are all things that will benefit Byrum Brown, and we don't need to dance around that.
Yeah, it's, to me, when you have an offense that either goes as fast as humanly possible, which this one does, or is similar to a lot of the Hugh Freeze offenses in the past, where the receivers or the pass catchers are making decisions during the play and the quarterback has to know those decisions, the more familiarity you have, the better. We know offensive line's always a continuity, familiarity conversation, and you have your starting center from last year at USF. But in those two scenarios, right, the super speed or the decision-making in the play, knowing what the guys are going to do and understanding the way that they comprehend and understand the offense is a big deal. And that's why I'm hopeful that in year one, they're going to look pretty decent in year one. I honestly, I think my bigger question, like, yes, how they translate to the SEC matters. And I am curious about that from an individual athletic standpoint.
Sure.
My bigger question is, in year two, what does this offense look like when Byrum Brown's no longer here? Sure. And you've lost some of these veteran pieces who have done this for multiple seasons under Golesh. That's honestly as big of a question for me as how they translate to the SEC in year one.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll obviously cross that bridge when we get there, because there are quarterback questions, following Byrum Brown, and we'll see what happens with Tristan Tia or, Lachlan Hewlett. But I think Auburn's next quarterback's probably not on the roster. And so that'll be an interesting discussion to have, I guess, in December when that door opens. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm not going to push back on that a ton, especially right now. But all in all, to say, like, Byrum Brown has the chance to reignite this fan base. And I think Alex Golesh knows that. I think him bringing Byrum with him and making sure he is well compensated and, adjusted to being an SEC starter, it's a big part of the confidence that Golesh has, because he's already, we've all seen the FE, the iron video of, like, what it actually means and all that. I'm not going to repeat it here, but it'd be very easy to find if you hadn't seen it. He probably still has that mindset, even if Byrum Brown's not here, but it has to help. It has to help with the confidence of it.
Yeah. Knowing, like, it feels like there's a certain floor that you can count on this season. And that's never been the case the last couple of years, last couple of coaching staffs with Auburn. It feels like there's a floor of, you've got X number of guys who have been in this offense for multiple years. They know what, like, you're not going to have Jeremiah Cobb get a play call wrong in the huddle because he did this at USF, right? Cole Best is going to understand what protection he should call because he's called this protection 50 times in this specific scenario. And I do think that familiarity helps. I do think that is the best case scenario for you for year one. Is it's a transition year, but it should be a high floor, kind of soft landing back into the SEC for Alex Golesh, because he has all these pieces that can not only teach the offense, but can teach the culture and help build the program the way he wants to build it. We haven't really gotten into the culture stuff other than the FE comment. And I do love Golesh's language that he uses in a lot of these things, whether it's how they want to run the ball, whether it's the FE thing. but the soft landing is going to definitely help. And I think that's going to be something that Auburn fans just need, because we've seen Auburn fans support this team even when they're bad. And it doesn't feel like, because of all this familiarity, Auburn has that big of a chance of being bad next year, barring catastrophic injury.
Yeah. Yeah. There are plenty of questions, though, about this offense. I've got one about the running back room. You've got one about the tight end room. That's next right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, the winter games are officially here. And if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to the individual events to finding your angle on all the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. And of course, with baseball starting this week, you can bet on the Auburn Tigers. They are plus 1,800 to win the College World Series. So the winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow with them with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Today's show also brought to you by our friends at Alumni Hall. Lindsay, can you imagine buying Auburn gear anywhere other than with our friends at Alumni Hall?
I would never do that. The idea of that is unfathomable.
The hat wall, when you walk into the Tiger Town location, the hat wall in the back wall, as a hat guy, it's a sight to behold. It
may be one of the wonders of the world. Like, there's the 7 wonders of the world. I've heard some people say there's an 8th. I think the hat wall is the 9th. Honestly.
Yeah,
and that's not hyperbole.
There's at least question there of like, yes. All right, is it to that point? No, they've got stuff for everything. And look, it's seasons are changing. If you want to make sure you have the right gear for the sports that you're attending, head over to Alumni Hall in Tiger Town or off of South College Street, or check them out at alumnihall.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. You know, we heard Golesh talk last week, and there's a lot of good stuff, and people have ran with different things in different directions, because I mean, the guy can talk and he'll give you info, and it's great.
Love that from a coach.
Yeah. When they discuss running back, I mean, he talks about Jeremiah Cobb as almost like, yeah, he's the starter. There's no question about it, which is great. And obviously you brought in some guys that would make sense if you didn't have Jeremiah Cobb for them to be starters, right? I think if Bryson Washington was a starter, like, okay, you could see the path there if you didn't have a Jeremiah Cobb. Same with Nykahi Davenport, just because you saw what he was able to do at USF. And then, I mean, I'm extremely high on Omar Mabson. I know a lot of people are. But I guess my question for the running back room is, what does RB1 look like in this system? So last year at USF, Byrum Brown led the way with 175 carries. Sure, no issue with that at all. Nykahi Davenport with 98, he was second. But like, you have this cluster of running backs where there's some separation and it's tiered, but it's not crazy. Where you had Davenport with 98 carries, running back Sam Franklin had 80, Alvin Isaac had 73, and then you have a pretty big drop off to Cartavius Norton had 32. And so I just wonder, like, if you have Byrum Brown, like, I think he'll have over 100 carries. I don't know if he'll have 175. That just seems like a lot in the conference, but we'll see. Yeah. We'll see. But if you have, okay, Cobb 98, and then Washington 80, and then, I mean, whoever you think is going to be RB3 for the sake of conversation, we'll say Davenport at 73, and then there's a drop off, and you either put Tay Meadows, a transfer from Troy, or Omar Mabson, at 32. Like, okay, that's fine. That's pretty balanced, though. That's a pretty balanced thing, Lindsay. And then when you look at 2025, just for the sake of, or excuse me, when you look at 2024, just for the sake of conversation, a little bit different because Byrum got hurt, but you had Kelly Joyner with 129, and then Naquan Wright with 109, and their third running back that year was Teron Keith with 78. So still, like, you had 1A and then a 1B, and then you almost had a 1C, but I guess a 2A in the situation where, like, the drop-off's not crazy. So I do think the way they use running backs is going to be different than we have seen at Auburn in a hot minute. Gus didn't use them this way. Harsha didn't use them this way. Freeze didn't use them hardly at all. So like, it's just kind of interesting. And I think when you look at it with that context, them bringing in multiple starting caliber running backs makes more sense.
I do think it's important to point out Cartavius Norton had his 32 carries in the first 5 games and then had a season-ending injury. And Davenport kind of took over after that. It's important to point that out.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. It does feel like Golesh wants a pretty balanced rotation, but he's not afraid to ride a hot hand. And I think that's something you've seen from some previous Auburn coaches, like Sam Franklin, 6 carries a game at USF, but he had 4 games with double-digit carries because he was effective, he was hot, and they rode him. Alvin Isaac had 1 game with double-digit carries because he was hot, and they rode him. So I do think that's an important understanding is like, hey, we've got maybe 2 guys that we really want to go with. And it does feel like Golesh wants one of those 2 guys to be a good pass protector. Davenport graded out above average at that in PFF. Okay. Again, not gospel, but we know Jeremiah Cobb's not the best at pass protection. So it kind of feels, and Golesh has said, he's talked about pass protection is a huge part of playing running back. So I feel like that's probably part of the 1A, 1B. And then after that, it's who's been hot in practice this week. Who do we think is a good matchup versus the opposing squad? And if a guy gets hot in the game, we're going to just be willing to ride them a little more. But if you go with pace, like they have been, and they want to do, it feels like you almost need to have 3 running backs that you're comfortable running in the game. If you look at what they've done in Golesh's history, right? I have the numbers here. I found it. They've put up a ton of carries every single year. Like they're absolutely, was it 39 carries a game at USF last year? The season before that with the Byrum Brown injury, it was like 44. And when he was at Tennessee, it was 40 carries per game. So 2 guys you can kind of count on as 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
And then you rotate other guys through in situations or via matchups. It makes sense. My question is, you've brought so many really talented running backs in. Cobb and like Jeremiah Cobb feels like a lock to be number 1. We heard that from Golesh last week, the way he talked about him.
Sure.
Bryson Washington versus Nykahi Davenport's a really interesting number 2 conversation. And then after them, there's a ton of options you could go to at running back. And I just don't really know what they're going to end up doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my gut is Cobb 1A, Washington 1B, and then I think it's Davenport, then Mabson, then Tay Meadows. But I've talked to some people that are really high on Tay Meadows, so I'm not entirely sure.
Davenport having the experience in the offense makes me wonder, is that second job legitimately going to be a battle in fall camp?
It could be. I also think it's worth noting that I think this was when he was talking to media members in Mobile, but he kind of stopped somebody and highlighted how young Davenport was too. And so is that him
moderate the expectations? Yeah.
Yeah. Is that just him giving context, or is this a situation where it's like, yeah, he's more of a plan for the future? I'm not sure.
I do have to ask, does receiving prowess, you think, matter into this? Because what do we know about this veer and shoot? It is pace. It is vertical passing. Like, does the passing or the receiving acumen of the running back, does it matter in this? I don't
think it matters. It always matters some. So Alvin Isaac. Yeah, in 2025, Alvin Isaac had 12 catches for them.
And he was the
Davenport had 5. Sam Franklin had 5.
Yeah. So like, I feel like it might be one of those things kind of like pass blocking. Like it might settle a tie. It might break a tie. Yeah. But like, does that matter as much as understanding the offense and the breakaway speed that they kind of want? I don't know if it does, but I am kind of curious how he makes these decisions. I mean, Isaac, 13 catches. Want to point out 14 targets, 13 catches. The kid caught everything, went his way, 112 yards. But and he lined up in the slot a little bit too. Like he was doing something,
and that's worth noting with Cobb. Like, could you do some stuff formationally with Cobb?
2 running backs on the field, and then
if you needed to. So we'll see. I mean, they got the guys in that give you a chance. The running back room makes sense. Now you just they get to mix and match from a scheme standpoint, a fit standpoint. Like I love it. I love the running back room that they assembled there. So the tight end room is interesting as well. Lindsay has a question about the tight end room. We'll also preview this weekend series. That's next, right here on Locked on Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. Can you imagine saying, hey, I want to refresh my space and not checking out our friends at wayfair.com?
Zach, I refreshed my space just a week or two ago. I bought a couch for this office, and I bought it from Wayfair. And I got to tell you, assembly was super easy. There's no like cheap flimsy wood. It is metal. It is incredibly sturdy, incredibly comfortable.
Yes.
Got it from Wayfair. Shipping was faster than I expected. It was more affordable than I thought. And honestly, I like it a lot better than going to one of the box stores and buying a piece of furniture from there. It's fantastic stuff.
Yeah. Just have it show up right at your door. I love Wayfair. It's where we get a ton. Almost all of our furniture is from Wayfair. So get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That is WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Today's show also brought to you by our friends at Indeed. Can you imagine? Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
When you hire someone, Lindsay, do you just want to fill the space, or do you want somebody who is the perfect fit for the job?
I hired somebody over at Braves Today just recently to help me out with Atlanta Braves coverage for 2026. And I had a long list of people, of traits that I wanted that person to have.
Yes.
And guess what? Indeed made it really easy to go through and make sure the applicants checked every single box that I had on my sheet.
Well, like when you're trying to hire someone, like, okay, we agree that you want certain list of traits, but do you want it to take a long time, or would you like Indeed to kind of say, hey, here are your ideal candidates. There's no reason for you to spend hours and hours and hours shifting through all these resumes.
Listen, I have a full-time job and I do coverage. Like I wanted this to be quick and easy. And I reached out to Indeed and they gave me a list of applicants that matched the criteria I had. They did the legwork for me, Zach.
Incredible. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get the job, the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That is Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, final few minutes on today's edition of Locked on Auburn. Lindsay, the tight end position is super interesting. It's obviously a big part of what Alex Golesh and his offense tends to do. It's a big piece of it, and there are questions about this room.
Yeah, and I think my big thing is we know when you're running with tempo, you got to have versatile guys who can do everything. If you look at their room last year, they had a guy on the field for just about every single play. 939 snaps. I'm sorry, for the tight end room, 946 offensive plays. Does Auburn have the two guys that you would need that can do everything? Because I feel like you got a lot of tight ends out of the portal, a lot of different kind of skill sets. Do they have the guys that can line up as an H-back and be an inline tight end and be a wide receiver split out wide? I know you got Jonathan Eccles. He did some of that. Do you have the two guys you can count on to be good enough at doing everything that lets Golesh run his full offense? Because he uses them a ton.
He does. And once again, we've talked about this before. That doesn't mean you're throwing to them a ton. It means you're using them formationally a ton to not have to sub. So Jake Johnson, the transfer from North Carolina, obviously could be a piece of that. Hunter Herring, I think, is the most interesting player in this room just because he's a former quarterback from ULM. Arlis Boardingham, I think, is a depth piece / high upside. I'm not expecting him to be the first or the second guy. I think it's going to be Jake Johnson And then Jonathan Eccles, who is another USF guy. I mean, we talked earlier about how the familiarity with the system is a big deal. I also think Ryan G has a chance to compete for snaps as well. And then I think Xavier Newsome, the transfer from Howard, is a depth piece for the future. Same with the true freshman DJ Broughton, even though I am very excited about the future of his game as well. But I mean, to answer your question simply, like, do they have those guys? Yeah, I think they do. I think they have it with Jake Johnson and then with Jonathan Eccles. I mean, we talked about a 1A, 1B with the running back room. I think we might see a similar thing with a tight end. And there's always this tendency of, okay, are you a blocking tight end or a receiving tight end? We saw that a ton with Hugh Freeze, and they use a bunch of tight ends as well. But I think with Golesh, you're going to see guys that have to do both, and they're going to have to do both well, or they're not going to stay on the field. I also think from just a stamina and rep standpoint, like you might see guys like, okay, this is the Jake Johnson drive. Okay, this is the Jonathan Eccles drive, because they don't want to have to sub. So
this is the Ryan G drive, like from a snap count
standpoint. What's that?
They did have 4 different tight ends get at least 5 snaps a game last season. So I do feel like you're going to have to rotate plenty. And I think your point on having this guy on this drive, we go to the next guy, and we share time early in the game, and maybe whoever's most effective gets more of that time down the stretch, right? But I do just, that's always the big concern, because tight end is such a difficult position, because you're doing offensive line stuff, you're doing wide receiver stuff. There's a lot that goes into it. So I'm glad to hear that we think these guys we have are versatile enough for this.
Yeah, and I like how young the room is too. Like, you're going to lose Jake Johnson and Hunter Herring after this year, but Boardingham Jr. can come back, and then Eccles, Newsome, and G are all sophomores. Then DJ Broughton, obviously a freshman. So I like how young the room is too. So I think they did a good job of building that unit. Let's pivot quickly. I'm just going to ask you an open-ended question. If you could spend 90 seconds on it, Lindsay.
Yeah.
What are you watching for Auburn's opening series for baseball this season? Starts Friday. They host Youngstown State, which is not a state.
Nope.
What specifically are you watching for? What should Auburn fans be watching for?
The number one thing I'm looking for is what the starting pitchers, not how deep they go, because we know Butch doesn't push them very hard in the first weekend, but maybe necessarily how comfortable and efficient they are. We know that Butch has prioritized throwing strikes. He wants you to be in the zone and wants your stuff to compete in the zone. I want to see how good these guys are at getting hitters out in the strike zone, because we know Butch wants that. I'm watching that, and then I'm watching to see from a position player standpoint. I feel like you're going to get Chris Rembert leading off, even though he might be a little bit better as an RBI producer batting second or third.
Okay.
But I want to see how well the team does at getting the leadoff hitter on in every inning and pushing the pitch count on those starters, like on those opposing starters, because like Youngstown State, they won 15 games last year. You should be fine. I misspoke on that last week. But after that, Cincinnati, Kansas State, Florida State, Louisville, really good teams right away.
Yeah.
And Auburn's offense needs to be able to push the opposing starters, get into that bullpen early, so that the pitching staff has the runway to figure out who's going to pitch where and who is most efficient. So that's what I'm watching for this weekend. Speaking of, we'll have more about that this week on the Barn Baseball Show, where I'm interviewing Butch Thompson.
Ooh.
And you did a great job, by the way, with Gabe Gross. Some great questions in there.
Yes.
Really enjoyed that.
Yes. I said that to Lindsay last week. It'll be up for everyone this afternoon. So be sure to check that out. And then Lindsay and I will go. Are you with me this week?
Yes.
Afterwards. So Lindsay will be live with me right here on Locked on Auburn after the games this weekend. So just like we do with football and basketball, we're gonna attempt to go for every single one of them for the baseball season. So be sure to hang out with us there too. And if you miss it, you can watch it after the fact as well. Lindsay, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
I'm on social media at Crosby Baseball, the Auburn baseball stuff, thebarnauburn.com, the Atlanta Brave stuff, bravestoday.com.
Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked on Auburn.